We are being joined in studio by Dr. Kristie Ebi, a professor at University of Washington. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for your interest in climate change and health.
It is an interesting topic. I'm a kid from South Florida, so extreme heat, I know all about it. But let's talk about the impacts on public health. We automatically think of heat stroke, heat exhaustion, but what have you uncovered as far as extreme heat on the role that plays on public health?
Almost every death in a heat wave is preventable. So essentially, we should be right now trying to reduce the impacts of high temperatures on human health and well-being. The Pacific Heat Dome that was a little over a year and a half ago in Oregon, Washington, and in British Columbia, there were more than 800 excess deaths. These are 800 people who would not have died if there hadn't have been a heat wave. And that's just a microcosm of the kinds of impacts that we're seeing. There was major heat waves in Europe in 2003. There were 70,000 excess deaths. There was a study done 2 years ago looking at what proportion of summer heat-related deaths are being caused by climate change. They looked at 43 countries, about 700 locations, and concluded that 37% of heat-related deaths during the summer are because of climate change. So we need to really, as public health professionals, take action.
So what can be done to prevent further or more deaths as it relates to extreme heat?
The biggest is to develop a heat action plan. And a heat action plan has two major components. The first is a heat wave early warning and response system, and I'll talk about that in a minute. The second is long-term planning. Climate's going to continue to change. We're going to have more intense heat waves. I live in Seattle. We have so many cranes. We continue to rebuild the city, and we need to rebuild our cities taking into account these future temperature patterns. And we need to take into account inequities. We know since the 1930s there was redlining done of districts where primarily black and brown residents lived. Those parts of the city are hotter than the rest of the city. They've got fewer trees, they've got more cement, and it's part of the history of inequities in our country that we need to also address. And so we need to think about tree planting programs. Trees take decades to grow, but we need to plant trees. We need to think about how to reduce the impact of our urban infrastructure on city temperatures. We also, as I mentioned, have to have early warning and response systems. This is more than my lovely broadcast meteorologist telling me that it's hot. I need to know what to do. And cities need to be organized around what to do, setting up cooling shelters so there's places for people to go. Finding the trusted voices that can reach out into the marginalized communities, to the homeless population, to make sure that they're aware of the risks and what they need to do. They're not difficult to put together. They do require political will, and they do require an all-of-city response. And so you'd need to have the police department, the fire department. All those groups come together to work out what are the best responses to protect people. Under NOAA, the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, there is a program to help cities coordinate their actions so that people don't have to start from zero. They can learn best practices from other places that have put these systems in place.
Well, let's hope more and more cities get on board. This is a very, very important topic. As you mentioned, climate change is here. You are seeing the effects of it firsthand with your research. So thank you for what you're doing, and we appreciate you sitting down with us here today.
Thank you for your interest.